Hi everyone, Sandra here again, and we are on week 4, I think, of the prepping series, or Be Prepared. And it's just a series for a lot of folks that maybe haven't thought about prepping for power outages and or some kind of natural disaster or catastrophe. And so today we're going to be talking about food and cooking. And I was hoping to be outside because, holy mackerel, this past week, yeah, that polar vortex, and yowzers, our regular temperature was like 25, 26 below zero. And then, you know, at that 40 plus below zero wind chill, it was brutal. It was pretty nuts. But today, only a few days later, it's in the 40s. Can't believe it. Most of the snow is melted away. I mean, there's still some out there, but it's really nice. So I was hoping to go out there and videotape out there, but it started raining, so I'm in the basement instead. So anyhow, let's get started. Now, with food, you have several different options. Well, of course, at the beginning of any kind of disaster or catastrophe, power outage, whatever you want to call it, you're going to want to use your fridge and your freezer foods first because they're going to spoil, so go ahead and use those up. But then if you have to start going into all your dried goods, you have to first of all just think about how long are you going to have to make this last. Some disasters or power outages only last, you know, a day or two. Other ones can kind of drag on for weeks. It just depends on your situation. So that's probably your first thing you need to think of. Now, the different types of food, to start with, there is freeze-dried food, and a lot of people like freeze-dried food. It definitely has some benefits to it. It is lightweight, and it shrinks down, so you can store a lot of it in a small amount of space. And the flavor's really good too. You can literally eat it dry as it is. Even the meats, they pre-cook that before they freeze dry it. A lot of it you would want to hydrate though, but you could eat it dry. I'm just letting you know there if you're really short on water. The only real downside I feel to freeze-dried is that it's expensive. So if you have the extra money, go right ahead. But maybe if you're prepping for a lot of people, it might not be that great of an option for you. Or maybe you just use certain foods that you really like, so you don't buy a whole bunch of meals or a bunch of vegetables when you just want like a certain type of meat. So think about it that way. Then there's dehydrated food, and I dehydrate a lot. Not as much as I used to when the kids are still at home, but I still do it. I tend to dehydrate more vegetables than anything else, but even if you have a really super basic dehydrator, you can dehydrate a lot of stuff. A lot of frozen goods, you can put them in the dehydrator. You can, you know, anytime you have surplus from your garden or there's a sale, anything like that, go ahead and dehydrate some food. You know, they're beneficial the same way that freeze-dried is, whereas they shrink up so they don't take up a lot of space, and they too are very lightweight. Now, the freeze-dried comes pre-packaged, so they're in those nice packaging, usually kind of like a Mylar, so they're sealed, they're airtight, whatever. Do that with your dehydrating fruits and veggies and whatever else you're dehydrating. If you have a vacuum sealer, because that's what I always did, I would vacuum seal it in those vacuum sealed bags, and even if your house is flooding or something, they won't get wet, they'll stay good. So otherwise, just, you know, wrap them up tightly. I would say wrap them tight and then put them inside of a Ziploc bag. And again, use those where you got to pinch them shut as opposed to the zipper, because those tend to stay better, seal out any kind of moisture and stuff more so. And if you can get oxygen absorbers, that'll help too. It's just up to you. It's just how you want to do it. Usually if I use an oxygen absorber, I'm using it in a jar as opposed to a bag. But this is your preps. You do what you want, what works for you. And then of course, one of the last food preps we're gonna talk about is canned food. And a whole lot of us can, whether it's water bath or pressure canning or both. Now, the benefit I feel to that is that you can eat it straight out of the jar, whatever it is. So if you canned up a batch of chili, you just open that up. Of course, you may want to heat that up, but you don't have to. You know, the same thing with corn or tomatoes or whatever it is you have canned up. You can eat it straight out of the jar. And that's, of course, the same as if you buy cans from the store. That's fine too. You know, anything that's canned by nature is cooked, so you can open it and eat it. The downside to canned goods, as I'm sure you're already thinking it, is that it does take up more room and it is heavier. So if you have to evacuate or just leave last minute, something like that, you're not going to want to take a bunch of canned stuff with you. So depending on what you're prepping for, your finances, your family, all of that, think about what you would want to do in different scenarios. Now, maybe you want a combination of all these things, and that's probably a really good idea. You know, keep some stuff at home. I mean, that will stay at home, like your canned goods, and keep some stuff you can grab and throw in a bag and take with you on the road if need be. You're going to want to buy things, maybe not so much with the freeze-dried, but with your dehydrated and your canned goods, you're going to want to rotate those out. So make sure you buy stuff that you can use at home in, you know, any kind of everyday situation. You know, like I like to dehydrate mushrooms. And so I will keep those on hand, and I'll put them in my spaghetti sauce and this and that. I don't have them dehydrated solely as my preps. You can have some that are more long-term storage, and you can have some for your pantry, but you still want to rotate out that long-term storage. So if it's been, you know, a year since you last dehydrated mushrooms or something, go ahead and use those up and then dehydrate some more, you know, as soon as you can. And moving on to cooking, there's several different things you can do. Okay, so if your kitchen stove is not working for whatever reason, I think the first thing most of us would do is turn to our grills, and that's a great idea. So whether you have a propane grill or a charcoal grill, try to make sure you have extra fuel on hand simply for situations like that. And you can cook everything on your grill, from a pot of coffee to steaks, brats, corn on the cob, whatever it is you need to cook. You know, make sure you have some good cookware though. You can use stainless steel. I have stainless steel pots and pans. You just got to watch the handles on there if they're not steel themselves. And of course, if you have cast iron, that would be awesome. Otherwise, it'd be kind of hard to cook stuff that's kind of on the liquidy side. I'm sure you can problem solve a little bit and use some tin foil or something along the lines of that. Now, if maybe you have an extended power outage, or unfortunately you didn't get enough gas or charcoal, well, with your charcoal grills you can use wood in them, but it's kind of tricky using wood in a charcoal grill if you haven't done it before. So there's definitely a learning curve there, and you wouldn't want to use any kind of wood like cedar or pine, but it is something to think about. Otherwise, when it comes to cooking during some kind of disaster, camping stores are one of your best friends, or any place that sells camping gear. If you have to evacuate, you have to leave where you are. One of the best ways to cook I have found is on a little gasifier camp stove. And those only need small amounts of fuel, like twigs, little pieces of branches, you know, some kind of tinder to get it going, you know, but you can get a really good fire. You put a little camping pot on top of there, and you can cook pretty well on that. I actually made a video, I'll link it down below, and got my fire going on a little gasifier I have, although I actually did the bottom piece wrong because I was not having the best day. I still got the fire going. That's all you need to know. I still got the fire going, and I made soup on there. So if you want to check out that video, check the link down in the description. But those are really good because they'll fold up flat. So you can shove them easy in a backpack or even in a purse if you need to. And like I said, you don't need a lot of fuel. The downside to those are if you had to cook for a lot of people. Not really designed for that. A lot of people use them when they go out hiking and stuff. So it's good for 1 or 2 people, but not for a larger family. So then you could just use a regular camping stove. Many of us have used them before when we go out camping, and usually there's some kind of gas to go along with that. I'll put links to some of this stuff down below, and so you can look and see what's out there, the different price ranges, and what would work for you. You know, how big a camp stove do you need? But camping stoves are really nice because usually they're big enough where you could put a good amount of food or 2 pots. And of course, don't ever use them indoors. You do need to take those outdoors. You don't want any of that kind of smoke or fumes in your house. But yeah, they can really help you out a lot. Now, probably the last way I would choose to cook if I had to would be on a campfire. So if you don't already have a fire pit out in your yard, you know, just dig a hole. It doesn't have to be real deep. Make it however big you think you need it, and you know, put some stones and that around there. You don't want fire jumping or anything like that. You want to make sure you stay safe. But yeah, you can get a fire going there, and then you can put a grate like from your grill on there, or if you already have one. I mean, there's a lot of different ways you can cook on a campfire, and actually I'll put a link to that too down in the description. But cooking on campfire can be tricky. Most of us have done stuff like hot dogs and s'mores, but it can be done. You just have to watch it. There's different ways of building fires. I did a video on cooking on Dakota fire hole or fire pit, just depends on what you want to call it. And it's doable. When you are in a situation where you don't have a lot of choices, you'd be surprised at what you can do. People are resilient, and we do what we have to do, right? You know, if times get hard, you don't quit. You just keep going. And I'm hoping that this is getting you guys thinking just a little bit. There's a lot of different scenarios that could happen one day, and I want people to be able to take care of themselves, to be prepared, not be so caught off guard. And you know, because when you're a little bit more prepared, when something bad really happens like that, you can feel a little more confident because you're not as helpless, you know, as maybe somebody else who didn't prepare ahead of time. And bad things happen all the time to people around the world, and it just is what it is. So if you could think about a few things ahead of time and get yourself ready for what if, and hopefully what if never happens, but if it does, then you'll be ready for it, and you'll be able to take care of yourself and your family a little bit better. Anyhow, give me some of your tips on cooking and food in a prepping situation. I'd be really happy to hear them, and I'm sure all the other people would be as well. Thumbs up that video, share it if you think somebody could use it. That would be great. And subscribe if you aren't already a subscriber. It was nice talking to you, and you take care.